What is up? What is going on, everybody? I am back with another Seattle Mariners video. Before I dive into it, do me a favor if you guys can hit that subscribe button. I'm about 60 subs away from my next big goal of 2,500. Hit the like button as well. That lets YouTube know you enjoy the video so other people may enjoy it as well. Comment your thoughts down below. Thank you guys again for all the support this season. We're moving on to Seahawks, but there will be plenty of Mariners content. Probably a Mariners video a week, if not more. I mean, there's going to be some lull dead time where there's not a lot to talk about, but Mariners content is still going to be coming very heavy. Now, my video today was actually going to be a season recap, talk about some positives, negatives, get into all that. But I didn't realize the Mariners had their end of postseason. That would be amazing. End of season press conference with Jerry, Justin, and Scott. Some interesting things said, and I'm going to dive into it. Before I do, I want to say a couple things on it. I normally don't put any stock into these GM coaching press conferences. It's usually just a lot of nothing burgers. Listen, and Jerry said some things I didn't like. He said some things I agree with. I'm going to get into it. But in the grand scheme of things, they're not going to give you their plan. Jerry's not going to stand there and go, yep, we're going to offer this to Ohtani. We're going to offer this to get Juan Soto and Pete Alonso, and that's going to be our goal for the offseason to get all those guys to make the roster better. They're not going to say those kind of things. It would be the same thing if for a Seahawks press conference, Seahawks are playing the Chiefs and going, hey, Pete, how are you going to stop Patrick Mahomes? The answer is going to be some BS coach speak. Oh, we just got to keep contain on him and do this. They might have some secret game plan. They're not going to give that away. So don't come out of this going, Jerry didn't mention any names of players. They're not going to do that. First of all, that could be a tampering issue if you even did that. So take that with a grain of salt. I judge based on actions more than words. Now, words can hurt and words can be important. But for stuff like this, I judge it based on the product. I don't really care what Jerry says. If he goes out and delivers a World Series next year, then great. If he doesn't, then there's conversations to be had. Now, with that said, there were still some interesting comments made that I think deserve to be addressed, essentially. So let's start out with the first banger that we had to open it up. Dipoto said this season, as much as it was disappointing in the end, was a step forward for us. Sustainable roster, competing for championships year in and year out. Forward steps for young players. Our challenge as a front office is to find a way to step forward. We didn't have a disaster of a season. We had a season we were unable to finish, whether it's roster building or executing in situational moments. That's what we have to focus on. I would actually agree with every single thing in that. Outside of this season was a step forward. There might have been some step forwards in the organization. I think the minor league system, for what we thought it was going to be after the Castillo trade and graduating a lot of players, took a step forward. I think J.P. Crawford took a step forward. I think another great season from Cal Raleigh is a step forward. Kirby, whoever, Julio, whoever you want to throw in there. I think there were step forwards, but as a whole, no, it was not a step forward. It was a step backwards. I mean, they were worse than last year by wins and losses, by results. And baseball is a sport that can have a lot of non-results based analysis, and I'm a part of that. I look at the analytics and stuff, but at the end of the day, it was not good enough. There's going to be another different team hosting a World Series trophy, and they didn't even get into the dance when it's all said and done. You did not even get into the playoffs. If they would have gone to the World Series and lost in 7 games to the Braves, you know, I can stomach those comments. I can. The World Series would hurt. But you didn't even get into the playoffs after last year getting in, winning a series, and pushing a good Astros team to the brink. You did. And it was a disappointing finish, but it was there to have that step forward. And overall, as an organization, you didn't. Does that mean that there weren't step forwards within the organization? Not at all. But overall, it was not a step forward. And I've defended Jerry Dipoto. I think Jerry's done a good job. I think this organization is better than it was when he started. I think it was left a mess by the previous general manager, Jack Zrenzik. I think Jerry has, for the most part, done a good job here. That doesn't mean he's perfect. So comments going, oh, no, he's done this, this, and this. He has not been perfect. No general manager is. But I think the core here is solid. I think there's a lot of pieces to build on necessarily. There are a lot of pieces to build on. And they can take the next step forward, hopefully. But to say that this season was a step forward, and listen, you're catching these guys in press conferences. They say things. I'm not going to hold Jerry to the fire for one wording. But it wasn't. And here's the thing, too. They've been here, Jerry, Scott, Justin, at least Jerry and Scott. I'm not positive when Justin came to the organization. They've been here since 2016. Like this wasn't their second year as a tandem. And after making the playoffs the first year, they kind of took a little step back. This is going to be year 8 or 9 of this group here. You need to be more consistent. I want multiple playoff appearances. There is nothing you can ever do to guarantee a World Series. I don't, God, this is going to sound really like a defeatist thing to say. I don't expect World Series. Like there's a lot that goes into winning a World Series or a Super Bowl. I'll always use the example, the 2013 Seahawks. That was maybe the best roster, top to bottom, the NFL. I don't know. You could be 85 Bears things. There's been great rosters, the Cowboys of the 90s, the Niners of the 80s. But one of the best rosters in the NFL that I've ever seen was the 2013 Seahawks. And if Richard Sherman slips or just tips it the wrong way, the Niners might win that game. That team doesn't even go to the Super Bowl as good as they were. So it is very hard. I'm never going to hold a GM and say, like, you didn't win multiple World Series necessarily. But this team, it wasn't losing a World Series. It wasn't even getting into the playoffs. Jerry and Scott have been here for, this will be, like I said, their 8th, 9th year. They have one playoff appearance. Some of that, like I said, some of that falls on Zarensik and the previous regime, leaving them with an older core, not a very good farm system. A lot of it goes on ownership. I'm going to dive into that. And again, I think Jerry's done a good job here, but there needs to be more consistency. We need to see this team be a perennial playoff team, not got hot one year, got in, and then we're very close. We're very close. This would have been fine if you reverse the seasons. If this was last year and then last year was this year, like maybe I can understand that comment a little bit more, but definitely didn't really care too much about that comment. Let me find the next one here that Jerry said. Justin Hollander said, I don't think it's any one person's fault. It's a collection of things that didn't go the way you wanted to or that we wanted to. I think that's a fair statement. There's the 4 corners for me or the 4 pillars of blame, and they all deserve some blame. Ownership, Jerry, coaching staff, players. All 4 deserve blame for this. For the Mariners not getting over the top. I feel like I'm talking about this season like they lost 100 games. And, in some regards, if I was a Royals fan or an A's fan, these videos would be easier. And I'm not, if you're a Royals fan or A's fan, watch that. Don't take that as like an insult. But it would be a disaster. And I could seriously say this team is garbage. Like I was watching a lot of New York Giants fans' videos after the Seahawks game last night, and their comments were just, this team sucks. And it makes sense. They're 1-3 with like a negative 70-point differential. The Mariners are in a tough spot, like not as a fan, as a person that makes videos about them. Like they won 88 games with a plus 100 run differential. They were a pretty good team, taking away the frustration glasses. This was not a bad baseball team by any means. But the goal now, and it's unfamiliar territory for Mariners fans, is how do we get to that next level? It's not good enough to just make the playoffs. That's been the frustration with the Seahawks from a lot of people. It just wasn't good enough to just get in. How can this roster go from that to the next step? And that's what we're trying to, that's what the Mariners are trying to figure out, and hopefully they can. Dipoto's next comment was, I don't know the solution to our problems is big name players. On whether ownership is given a green light to provide necessary money resources to get big name free agents. Yes, we do have freedoms to do that, he said. So the second part of it, that we do have the freedom, whether he does or not, I don't know. He's not going to throw John Stanton under the bus, who writes his check in a press conference. You can call Jerry soft weak for that, but if I was doing a press conference on my work, I probably wouldn't be bashing my boss too much. So I get that part of it, and listen, the whole ownership thing, I do not like John Stanton. Like I said, I'm not one of these people that, oh no, he made $1, how dare he? But like, it's not a good ownership group. Now there could be worse out there. But there's nothing we can do about that. John Stanton's going to own the team. We can't change that. And whether it's Jerry trying to outsmart the room or Scott trying to, or John Stanton not spending the money, I don't know. But we're going to have to live with John Stanton, so you got to get used to that. As far as the first point, I don't know the solution is big name players. Now, remember what I said in the beginning, that to take these with a grain of salt, what are said in these press conference. Jerry is not going to go up there. No GM is going to say, God, we need Shohei Ohtani so bad. Oh my gosh, give me Shohei Ohtani. I want Ronald Acuna on this roster bad. No one's going to say that in their press conferences. That they're just it's going to be vague answers. He's probably right that just going to get a big name for the sake of a big name doesn't fix all of the problems that you have. But this roster, there's a solid core that needs to be supplemented by better talent. There's too much, and I'm not trying to pick on these guys because they didn't play that poorly in September. You can't have Sam Haggerty DHing in the most important game of the season. Haggerty actually had a nice September, so I feel like I'm picking on the poor guy. Sam Haggerty needs to be your pinch runner in the 9th inning when Eugenio Suarez gets a base hit. He should not be your DH in the most important game. There's too many. I was going to talk about it in my season recap. There's too many platoons on this team. Now, that's not saying that I blame Scott for platooning the players. I don't. They are platoon players. They have big efficiencies. Mike Ford, I know his career against lefties is okay. It's a small sample size. His at-bats against lefties have not impressed me. Rojas has not been historically good against lefties. Kelenic hasn't either, outside of one hot April this year. So I don't blame Scott for platooning him, but enough with platoon players. I'm okay with a couple platoon. You're going to have them. I don't have a problem with like Ryan Bliss and Josh Rojas or something in a platoon. But you cannot have your entire 6 through 9 in your order being decided by platoons. You've got to get some everyday players in there that can get the job done. Platoons just, one, it forces you to have to decide, do I play a hot hand or do I go with the matchup based on historical trends, righty-lefty? And it also exposes you to bullpens. Bullpens can play around with the platoons. They can bring in lefties, righties, where you're either forced to pinch hit or you're forced to have that player play against his weaker batting side. So they've got to get more everyday players in there. I'm not saying that Haggerty, Dylan Moore, those guys don't have value. They do. They're good role players. They should be on the roster, but they should not be your primary middle of the lineup hitters in your most important games. So yes, just getting a big name is not a solution. If this team had gotten Chris Bryant, that contract would have been a disaster. But whatever they want to do, they've got to find a way, trade, free agency, hoping they fall from the skies. They've got to get more. They've got to get better talent in here to supplement what I think is a pretty good core. Scott Service said, in my mind, we are as good as the Rangers or Astros, except for a couple games. A lot of these things probably aren't wrong. It's just hard to hear it after this season. Like, I don't want to hear that. He's probably correct. He probably is. But you know what? Did Niners fans, and I'm sorry to go back for football, but it's football season. We got to talk a little football. Did Niners fans want to hear after the 2013 championship game from Jim Harbaugh, or who was the GM at that point, Trent Baalke for the Niners, go, hey, we're right there with Seattle. If it wasn't for that tipped pass, we would have won the Super Bowl. It doesn't matter. You know what matters right now? Texas just won their game 1 today. Houston has a bye week. They're in the playoffs. They don't care that the Mariners were just a little bit short of them. They were close. They were. And the Mariners had a chance to beat those teams in the final 10 games and did not get the job done. Now, again, in terms of the core, what you have, and if you make the right moves this offseason, I absolutely think you can compete with those teams. I absolutely do. But I don't want to hear it right now. I don't want to hear the comment that, oh, we're right there with Houston and Texas, as you saw. No, Scott, I watched the last 10 games. You weren't. Those teams kicked your butt. Actually, the Mariners did beat Texas the last series, but in the most important game of that series, they didn't. So don't want to hear it. Don't care. Dipoto said we put more runners in scoring position than anyone in the American League. He also added on that, it didn't get included in the stuff I'm reading, that they need to find a way to get better contact guys to bring those runners. I actually, and that comment got ripped pretty hard. I actually don't have a problem with that one. Number one, it's factual. It's true. They did have the most runners um, in scoring position, and unfortunately, they just didn't. They weren't able to bring them all home. I mean, you're never going to bring them all home, but bring enough of them home. I actually, like I said, I don't mind that comment because it goes back to like, hey, I think there are good pieces in place here. I don't mind Jerry, Scott, and Justin mentioning that. I don't. There is. And I think you've got to find a way to get, and that's kind of goes back to what I said before about the platoons. You need more everyday guys that are in there that can bring those runners in. Jerry talked about cutting back on the strikeouts. That's something they've got to address in the offseason too. Now, I don't mind home run strikeout hitters. There's been some great ones. The Donkey, Adam Dunn, other guys like that were the three true outcome players. Kyle Schwarber this year for the Phillies. But the problem is when your whole roster is like that, for the most part, it's an issue. There's way too many streaky players on this team. Gino is streaky. Teo's streaky. Julio is very streaky. Cal can be streaky because he's a big strikeout home run guy. And you did have some guys like Ty that I think we thought would be more consistent, but weren't. And I think the hope was Colton Wong would be a more consistent player, and he wasn't. JP was consistent this year. So they're not all inconsistent, but it's a lot of streaky hitters. And gee, what a shock when you have a lot of streaky players on your team. Is it a shock that the Mariners were, guess what? A very streaky team. There were times when this looked like the last 10 games, I didn't even know what a Mariner win looked like for some of those games. I couldn't even envision it. And there was that stretch in August where I would have put this team up against anybody. Couldn't even imagine what a Mariners loss looked like at certain times. They've got to find a way to get more consistent players in there that can help to help offset that a little bit. So I don't mind that comment. And if it's taken on its own, it looks kind of douchey. But when you look at what he said after it, I think it's fair. Jerry talked about the starting rotation and the injuries, talked about Robbie Ray possibly by the All-Star break next year. I think that's very fair. So for anybody going, oh, we got Robbie Ray back, it's probably not going to be. And I think I even said that a while back. I would venture to say the All-Star break is when Robbie Ray comes back next year. Jerry mentioned he doesn't see them adding much to the starting rotation. Again, take that with a grain of salt. I'll wait and see what they actually do. I do think they need to look at starting pitching. I'm not fully there yet on Bryce Miller or Brian Wu just being penciled into your rotation. Marco, hopefully back by spring training, but Marco's due a big pay increase. And while Marco, I think, would have been really nice to have in September this year with some of the injuries to Emerson Hancock and some of Wu and Miller's struggles, Marco's a number 5 at best. So that's not necessarily, like, oh yeah, that's happening. Again, though, I'm not going to put a lot of stock into that. In a press conference, again, coaches, GMs don't go out and say like, oh yeah, we're trading that guy. That's for sure. Cause you never know what's going to happen. And it's kind of a fallback. Jerry's not going to say, oh yeah, we want to add starting pitching. And then they go and they're not able to do it. Then it makes them look bad. So that's what a lot of that stuff is. The last thing I want to talk about is the final comment Jerry made. So Jerry kind of went on this weird rant in which he mentioned, it says the Mariners' goal is to win 54% of the time over the course of the long haul. And I think it was a really kind of random tangent. I think what Jerry's point was, if over the course of 10 years we win 54% of our games, that's going to mean some years are 84, but others are 93, 94, and we should have a sustainable winner. Kind of odd. I've never heard that before. I mean, he's got me tongue-tied. Listen, I get the point about a sustained winner, and I get where they're coming from. If we were just to go spend, you can end up with a lot of bad contracts and, be stuck in this purgatory. So I get that point. And I don't think this team should just go out and blow billions of dollars every year on the most mid-free agents possible. I mean, there was a lot of people pushing for them to spend. We would have ended up with Chris Bryant and Trevor Story. That'd be a disaster for this organization. So I get where he's coming from there, but this was the problem. that Jerry said. He finishes it off and he says all this, and that's fine. Then he goes, we're actually doing the fan base a favor by operating the way that they do. Oh, gosh. These guys just do not know how to read a room very well. Like, there's just, sometimes, you ever been in an argument with your significant other and you got to throw that last body blow in there? You shouldn't do it, but you say it. And right as you say it, you go, ooh, yeah, I probably shouldn't have said that. If he wants to make his point about the 54% thing, then whatever. It's a weird theory, but I guess it makes some sense. But to then say we're doing the fan base a favor, I mean, dude, you've got to read the room a little bit. And again, I'm sticking with football, and I know it's not a great comparison, but could you imagine, like, the Giants yesterday after whooping the Seahawks said something like, well, actually, we're putting this team in position. We're actually doing the fan base a huge favor here. And I know the Mariners were like light years better than what the New York Giants were last night, but I'm sorry. That is such a tone-deaf comment to make, that we're doing the fans a favor. And it's not, listen, it's not Jerry's fault that we sat through 2004, 2005, 2006, 2008, 2010. He wasn't here. But man, you've got to know what organization you're talking about. And it makes that whole comment look kind of stupid, in my opinion, because he starts out with the whole 54% thing, which, okay, whatever, man, cool. And then he gets into like that, and it's just kind of a ridiculous comment. Last thing I'll say, and I'm going to get out of here. And I don't know if I even said this. I've recorded this video a couple times here, so if I have repeated myself, I apologize. Jerry, Scott, and Justin, maybe it's just a confidence. Maybe it's a confidence they have. That's a good thing. You should be confident in your abilities. I don't want a GM and a manager and a I don't even know what Jerry's title is anymore, because Justin's the GM technically. I don't want them going up there being timid, like, we don't know what to do. Like, I want them to have confidence. But man, is there an arrogance with these three sometimes. Even Scott, a little bit. Like, there is a lot of, I very much get a tone from them of like, well, we know what we're doing. We've got this process in place, and we won 88 games, and we were just a little bit unlucky this year, and that's why we're not in the playoffs, so get over it. And it's one of those things where it's like, if they want to in private talk like that, that's fair. This team was unlucky this year. They were brutal in extra inning games and bad in one-run games. You could run the same roster out there next year, and they might win 92 games if Tom Murphy's healthy and some other things go right. Just by improving in extra innings, just by getting a sac fly against the Nationals and the Angels, they win 90 games. So if that's their theory and they want to take that behind closed doors, no problem with it. No problem with that. But out in public, it just, I don't know. And like I said, maybe it's just a confidence, but man, is there an arrogance with the three of them that is very, it just seems like they feel like they're talking down to fans a lot. Like, oh, we've got to answer this. And if they've won 97 games every year and we're knocking on the door and just hadn't quite got over the edge for the World Series, I'd be more like, hey, they know what they're doing. They've been right there. They had 1 year where they got in and they did pretty well. Other than that, the results have been a lot of mid. And this is from someone that thinks Jerry's done a good job. I do. I think he's done a good job. I think Scott overall has done a good job. I know that won't get a lot of love, but it is what it is. This is it. 2024, they have got to do something. And I don't know what the answers are. I'm going to dive into it as we get further into it. I haven't even looked at the free agent class outside of Mr. Ohtani. I haven't even really looked at it too much. This is it, though. They have got to produce a winner this season. No excuses. There's nothing left. If they are off to a slow start in May or June, Scott's going to be a fall guy. It is what it is. He's going to be gone. And that might happen. That might be justified. It might not. It's going to happen, and I'm not going to fight it. If they don't get in the playoffs in 2024, Jerry and Justin might be gone, and I'm not going to fight it. I'm not. They've got to find a way to get it done. John Stanton notwithstanding, guys, John Stanton isn't going anywhere. Okay? So we can sit here and go, it's the ownership. It very well might be. It very well might be. But he is not going anywhere. So this front office, it's put up or shut up time. Thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys all next time. Love you guys. Go Mariners. Peace.